the Being Yourself is the Strategy podcast, a show about building your business by being more of who you already are. I'm talking with values-driven entrepreneurs to find out who they are, what drives them, and how they're making an impact. Because when good people make money, we make the world a better place. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Emily Lauren Dick. Today we have Allison Prieur on the show. She's the founder of Dare Impact Consulting, and I'm so excited for you to meet her. Thanks for being here, Allison. Let's do this. So we often define ourselves only by what we do. And instead, I'm going to kick this off by asking you who you are, aside from what you do as a business owner.
Okay. So right now, it feels like one of the biggest jobs I have outside of business is being a mom. So I've got 3 young kids, and I am really happy it's summertime. I get to spend lots of time with them this summer. So that's my main job outside of a job. But I'm also I've always been really involved in community. I started volunteering really early, like at 8 years old. So I just really value being part of community, contributing, giving back, and learning from all the different folks that I get to meet along that way. And I also grew up as a musician. So I was in a marching band for 8 years.
Ooh.
And so the band is celebrating their 60th anniversary this year, which is super fun and has reminded me how important that community was to me over the years. So I'm looking for ways to, as my kids get a little bit older, to get back involved into that music side of who I am. But I'm a lifelong learner as well, is something that I always use to describe myself. So I'm a student and doing a lot of different things.
I love that. What instrument do you play?
So I started playing flute and then I switched to tenor saxophone. So I do both.
Cool. That's so neat. I love it.
Thank you.
All right. Now tell me about your business. What do you offer? Who do you help? And what stage would you say you're at in your journey right now?
Okay. So I am an evaluator. So in Canada, we have actually a credential called Credentialed Evaluator. So I went through a process of having my experience and my education recognized, and which was a really cool reflective process through the Canadian Evaluation Society. And we're one of only a few, 2 or maybe a couple other countries have that kind of recognition for this field. A lot of us, the reason that it's important is because a lot of us come into evaluation as what we call accidental evaluators. So I was a naturally curious person. I have been working in nonprofit organizations for my whole career. I joke that I didn't know there were jobs outside of nonprofits. So I've always worked in nonprofits, and I found myself volunteering for things that a lot of people don't volunteer for. So developing logic models and outcome measurement frameworks. And then after years of that, I found out that there was actually a profession that called evaluation, where that was the that was the main point of it. And so I started pursuing those roles more intentionally. Early, when I was actually a student, I had a field supervisor who was a consultant. And I thought that was so cool. She got to work with a lot of different organizations and just learn about their work in different ways. And there was always variety. And I kind of set a goal that I would like to do that someday. So after a number of years of working in the sector and building my skills, I started my consulting business. So we actually just celebrated 10 years in April of this year. Yeah, thanks. And the first 7, though, I was off the side of my desk. So I always had full-time or part-time roles within organizations. And I just 3 years ago went full-time in consulting. And what we actually do, what we offer is evaluation and organizational development supports for nonprofit organizations. So I work with mostly what we call small to mid-sized. And what that means is kind of up to like 25 million budgets, but all the way down to like we have 1 part-time staff and a volunteer base. So really work with the spectrum. And what I like to do, I call my work learning-focused evaluation. So I like to help organizations figure out what data they already have that they can use to better improve their programs, to make more of an impact, to work toward their mission and strengthen their work in that direction. And so I work really collaboratively in like a relational way with these organizations to help them understand what they've got, what they might be able to add within their capacity. So often these organizations have very little extra capacity to do this kind of work. And so we kind of find like the little spots that we can slip things in that will have a big impact.
I can imagine. That's amazing. So what made you pivot from working for these organizations to sort of starting your own thing as an entrepreneur?
Great question. And there's a couple of things so one was that initial goal that I liked that idea of being able to work with different organizations and have that variety. But the other thing I recognized as I was internal in organizations is that most organizations actually don't need me and a person with my skill set full time. So we can do a really great amount of work with my skill set part time, or really just chunks of my skill set. And sometimes I'm mentoring their team member, or developing that kind of coaching relationship, but also building systems. So I might be able to pop in, build a system, and maybe I'm working with you more intensely for a couple of months. But then once it's built, I might just be coming around every quarter to support you in analyzing and reporting on your data, that kind of thing. And so I find that rhythm works a lot better for the organizations that I really want to support. It's really the big organizations who have the funding and the capacity to hire someone like me full time.
Yes.
And while I think that there is value to all of that work, I just see these little organizations that I know are so passionate and can do so much. And that little extra bit of help, really, I see the growth that they have from that. And so that's what made me decide to go full time to help them.
I love that. And I think you've already kind of answered this, but is that your full why for why you got into this work? What is your why? Why do you do what you do?
Okay, great question. I started working in the sector. So my background, my undergrads are in psychology and social work, and I started working in more direct service roles, especially when I was a student and doing placements or summer positions. I was in direct service work, and I really didn't love it because it felt like I've part of my expertise is great pattern recognition. And so I was seeing that we're solving all these problems at the individual level, but that's not actually where the problem is, right? It's not individual problems. These are systemic problems. And so I really felt like I could most benefit the community by finding those opportunities for systemic change. And so that really is my why. I describe it sometimes as if I were pushing on a brick wall, and that brick wall might move only an inch in my career. But if I've moved in an inch and everyone around me has moved in an inch, then maybe we're actually making a difference. And, over the years, my thinking around that has evolved. I think that there's so much more awareness of the systemic challenges that folks face now that I think that there is a lot more opportunity to really dismantle some of these systemic issues that are happening. And I'm seeing it in organizations where they're able to also collaborate with each other, right? I can match organizations based on work I've done with them to say hey, there's an opportunity here. And if you tackle it together, you're going to have that much more impact than trying to face it alone.
That's so cool and so powerful. I love that. I love that. So what would you say is the scariest part of working for yourself, and how have you navigated those fears?
Oh my goodness. That's a great question. And two sides to it, I would say. So there's the scary part in terms of really just putting yourself out there and being vulnerable in that way. What if I say the wrong thing? And, being on this podcast, what if I say something and and it comes out and I'm oh my gosh, I can't even believe I said that. Or a year from now, my thinking has changed and I don't really love the way that I position something. So just trusting that, I'm doing my best given the current moment. And as I learn, things will change, but that's okay is one piece. So trusting being able to put yourself out there, being able to be visible to the right people in a way that is aligned with my values and what I really believe in, I think is one piece. And then the other scary piece, of course, is being able to support a family. And, not always knowing when you have a full-time position, you can feel a little bit more confident that you know exactly when paychecks are going to come in and that kind of thing. And I've had a couple of experiences where for whatever reason, things got delayed or, a project that looked like it was a sure thing ended up not moving forward. And so those are the kinds of behind the scenes pieces that you have to be constantly thinking about where you don't have to if you're in a regular full-time internal position, even though at any point those can be pulled away from you as well, right?
Totally.
So it's always there. And that's what I've kind of landed on is that at least I feel like I have a little bit more control over that in this way. So
I love that. I love that. And actually, so often people go right to the financial piece. So I love that you talked about the fear of that visibility. And I can totally relate to that, growth in your views and saying one thing and then being like, but I said that 3 years ago and now I know better. So
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that. So many people tie their worth as a business owner to their revenue. So how long did it take you before your business felt financially sustainable, or are you still in that growth season?
So the first years when I was part-time, I intentionally kept myself a small supplier. So what that means is you make less than 30K over 4 consecutive quarters, right? So I intentionally did that at the beginning because then I didn't have to charge HST and there was like reporting, right? And all of those kinds of things. So it made it, I had spoken with an accountant and that seemed like the right path for me at that point. And because I was working full time, I didn't have a lot of time to be doing this work on the side. So it made sense at that time. I was very, very, very lucky when I decided to make the move full time. It was a quick decision and not something that I had necessarily prepared for financially, really. It was right after my third maternity leave in 5 years. It was, not something that I was really ready for. But here I was, and I was very lucky that I had some good contacts, including one group I often work with. They're called Sustainable Livelihoods Canada. And they reached out kind of right away, like within a couple of days and said, hey, we hear you're available. We have a project. Are you interested? And so at the beginning, a lot of my work came through them. So I was, in terms of like my family's needs, financially sustainable pretty quickly. So almost like right from day one, I was able to find enough projects to get me there. The tricky thing is weaving those projects together. So in the kind of work that I do, which is, lots of like sole proprietors are set up differently. So my work tends to be project-based. They tend to be a little bit longer term. I'm, 2.5 years into a 3-year project right now. And so that stability really helps, just knowing that I have that income coming in. But would I say that I feel totally financially secure in the business today? Not yet. I think I'm still getting there. Yeah.
Are we ever really in that boat? I think I talk to so many entrepreneurs and we always kind of feel like we're in that limbo state, right? But it's a daring thing we do in this world.
Actually, one of the early projects that I had the opportunity to work on with Sustainable Livelihoods Canada was a feminist entrepreneurship project with the Canadian Women's Foundation.
Cool.
Which was, it was very cool. So we were evaluating that work as it got set up in the first 2 years of the project. And so we got to work with a lot of different entrepreneurs, organizations that supported them. And one of the things that really struck me, and I will not recall who said it, I apologize, but it was in a webinar. And someone shared that women tend to be risk aware. So sometimes we talk about it as risk averse, but we are aware of of what the risks are to our family of not being able to be financially sound, right? We know what that would mean for our family if we had certain, financial dips or things like that. And so I think that's a really great way to reframe it.
Totally.
Yes. That we may not take as many risks, but often it's because we can't, because we know that it will fall back on us. Yeah.
Exactly. So. And maybe tied back to those systemic issues you were talking about too, right? Women tend to be the primary default parents and things like that, all of those other consequences, right? So
it's definitely one of the things that plays into the way that I've structured my business is that I am the primary caregiver for my 3 kids. And so if they have a sick day, if they have, something that I would like to do with them, like a talent show or something, or, any of those unexpected events that might turn up, I have been very lucky to be able to choose partners and organizations that I work with where they're going to understand and honor that as well, so that I can, shift things as I need to or take the time that I need. And so that minimizes what, were I able to just say yes to everyone and work all the time and I can really hustle for this period of time to do that project, it would be a very different thing. I got to do that earlier in my career when I was younger and that worked at that time. But when we have these other responsibilities, we have to be more intentional about what we take on. So
absolutely. Things change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So aside from the financial side of things, what does success look or feel like to you?
So one of the things that I've really been sitting in this summer is a little bit more time flexibility. So something that this is for sure the first summer that I've been able to do that is really take this summer, I've chosen to take 2 days a week off and keep my kids home and spend that time with them in addition to the weekend. Also taking, a week of vacation in the summer, those kinds of things. So that's been a really nice example of success in my business.
Yeah.
But then it's also like being able to plan for the future. So I was just talking to some colleagues earlier this week and said, maybe it makes more sense to take a month off instead of having this like broken up, right? Like being able to take the space that I need to think about what version of the business will serve me in my life
Yeah.
has been is something that I love working toward and that I'm enjoying as an example of success. And then of course, just being able to really make an impact in community. So like I said, being able to choose those projects where I feel passionate about them, I feel like they're actually going to influence change has been something that makes me feel successful as well.
I love that. Women always have the best answers for that question, right? Like, aside from money, there's so many other things that are important to us. A lot of entrepreneurs suffer from imposter syndrome at some point in their careers. So it's that feeling that makes you doubt like your own skills and accomplishments. Have you ever felt that way, and how have you handled it?
I am 5 years into a PhD, probably partially because of imposter syndrome. So yes, definitely an answer. I think, now that I'm here, I do think that I'm gaining a lot from the experience and the process of doing the PhD. But I think in evaluation in particular, a lot of folks do have doctoral level education. And so feeling that I didn't have that made me feel less competitive maybe with some of my colleagues. But that was not something that was ever said to me. It was just something that I felt. So I do chalk some of that up to imposter syndrome. And then just as an entrepreneur as well. I mean, it was only within that feminist entrepreneurship project that I started calling myself an entrepreneur.
I love that.
Because that title didn't really feel like it fit with me before I saw the different ways that it could look. And so there's definitely elements of the choices that I've made in my work that have been influenced by feeling like maybe I'm not quite there yet, or maybe I need some other credential. I need some other something to make me feel like I can show up in that space. And the biggest thing that I find is really reflecting, like trying to notice when those feelings do come up and take a look at how true they are, really, right? So is it actually true that I need a credential to show up here? Or is that just part of myself trying to like hold me back or keep me small kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so I find like reflection is really the biggest tool that we have for that. Writing it down, but also talking to other folks, because there are times where even my clients, right? I'll say, I thought about this, but I'm not going to do it because of whatever. My clients are like, no, you need to do that. I have a quote from a friend and colleague who attended one of my webinars who said, don't assume we know what you know. And I loved that quote. Like that really hit me because we discount our experience and our knowledge so often. And we just think, well, this seems really straightforward and simple. So who am I to say this? Or like, what do I have to share that's actually of value? And I always come back to that quote from my friend because it reminds me like, no, we've all had different experiences. And so sometimes, especially in my work, as I said earlier, having that line of sight across organizations, I've found has really helped me build my confidence because as an example, I work with so many nonprofits who, often nonprofits are also women majority. And often the leaders feel some shame about their budgets because in the nonprofit sector, we're expected to have balanced budgets, which is wild when you compare it to any other sector, right? That is just not an expectation anywhere else. I've worked in government and it's like you dip in over here, you do whatever. We have a deficit, like it's fine.
Totally.
In nonprofits, now you're not getting funding. Now but the same goes the other way. You have too much of a surplus. So you're also not eligible for funding and whatever, right? So being able to sit with these leaders in these organizations and say, this is not a you problem. Like you're not bad at budgeting. The expectations of your budget are not realistic. And let me introduce you to these other leaders, or at least tell you the stories of these other leaders who are in a similar situation. It really builds that sense of connection. Again, takes that feeling off of the individual and onto, okay, well, what can we actually do about this then? Like where are there some levers that we can influence change? Or just that we can rethink how we feel about our own work.
I love that. Yeah. When we talk about our own shame or our imposter syndrome, it takes its power away, really, right? I love that you shared that example. Have you ever had a feeling like you had to be someone else other than yourself in business? And how did you get out of that? How did you get on the right path?
I will say that I had those experiences internally in some organizations that I worked in, where it became clear that there were expectations, not just of my skill or the work that I did, but the leader who once told me, "You're doing a presentation on this day. Can you wear your hair straight?" Yeah. Yeah. And so
Okay.
for me, creating my business was my opportunity to step out of that, right? No one
Love that.
else set expectations for me. And part of that, Colleen Mitchell is the supervisor's name who I mentioned earlier, who I really, looked up to her early in my career and throughout my career. But she showed up as she was. And
Mm.
she didn't have any, I can't say, she never told me that she had any reservations about that. And so that felt like it gave me permission to do that as well, right? It's that idea of like seeing those women who came before us doing this kind of thing that allows us to do it. And so I knew, hearing a quote like that or, anything about like what you wear, what shoes to choose, like
Yeah.
all of that kind of thing has come up for me in my work. And I don't have to have that. Like nobody tells me that anymore. There have even been times where I've like showed up in a meeting with my very colorful slide deck and a person has said like, "Wow, this is weird." And I've said, "Okay, so what do you want to say about the content on the slides?"
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And you just answered my next question about how you show up as your true self in business. So I love that your bold, bright branding colors are a part of that. Are there any other ways that you feel like you show up as you in business?
I will tell you that I'm almost going to flip this because it's actually how my business helps me show up as me.
Ooh, I love that.
Yes, thank you. Because I'm able to give so much grace to the folks that I work with because I believe it. Because so just like I was saying about being able to choose organizations, for example, who are going to understand if something comes up, I do the same for them. And there are times where I'm able to practice doing that for someone else in my business. So recently, a colleague was experiencing a family emergency and we just hopped right in and we were like,
Right.
don't even think about it. We've got this. And so often we don't actually have that modeled for us, especially in, I find, the nonprofit sector that, you really, if you step away, like things are going to fall apart. And that's by design, again, not within the organizations necessarily, or although there are things they can do to bolster it, but often by the system that's just so lean that there's one person in that role and nobody else has time to figure out what they've been doing and to really be able to have their back in a substantial way. And so in this instance, it really helped me see like, okay, how do I make sure that I'm set up in the future in my business so that that can continue to happen for me if it's
I
needed?
love that.
Yeah. And
That's
so it
so
gives
cool.
me the opportunity to reflect on like, okay, I can give this grace to somebody else. How do I also give it to myself?
Yes. It's so much harder to do it for ourselves.
Yeah. But I find practicing those muscles with others, and then again, reflective practice is part of our evaluator competencies. So it's something that I do
Cool.
often. But yeah, being able to reflect and to learn from those experiences has been really valuable for me.
Amazing. So tell me about some of the mistakes that you've made on your business journey and how they shaped how you work today.
So a couple things that I've done that I don't necessarily want to call mistakes.
I know, I hate calling them mistakes, but for the purpose of the exercise.
Yeah, learning opportunities for sure. We're probably like creating things that I thought that people wanted without, and I mean, in my defense, also like mentioning it to a couple of people, is this something that seems like it would be valuable? And they're like, oh yeah. And then I spend like the time creating it and it doesn't end up bringing me any like business value, which
Yes.
is tricky when you're an entrepreneur, because if I just spent, the equivalent of 5 days working on this, like that's time that I can't now bill. And so those are the ones where I am still figuring out how do you like build something without investing too much to feel like it's like a little bit of a sunk cost at the end. There's a marketing person who I follow, Natalia Sanyal, and she does a lot of like building out loud, like building on LinkedIn. And I think
Cool.
that's really cool because she's able to bring people in through the process and kind of check in to make sure that, there's actually going to be interest in what she's building before she invests as much time into it. So I think trying to figure out some of those processes for myself would
Yes.
be really valuable.
Very cool. Have you ever followed advice from someone that just didn't work for you? And what did you learn from that experience?
Think that I've always struggled with ideas of like, product ladders and things like that. And I tried to fit my work into that more earlier on and tried to be able to define my work in that way. And it never, ever panned out into anything. Most of my work is really custom. So often, whether an organization hears about me through referral, or they've worked with me in the past, or they've found me on like LinkedIn or something like that. They usually have a sense of what they want, and then we work together to figure out how I can support that work for them. But I find like spending a lot of time trying to productize my business hasn't really been that valuable for me. And so I've just like let that go. Kind of, especially the latter pieces, especially trying to have like the levers of like, oh, and this is the add-on, this is the this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I find need to do it that way. Yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't work for me. So
I love it. I love it. So you mentioned before reflection is one of the ways that you've learned to trust yourself. Are there any other strategies that you've learned to help you trust your own way of doing things when it comes to business?
I think I try to, it's still reflection, I guess. I try to look at a project, when I've completed a project, look at that project. If I've worked with others, try to bring them together and have a bit of a debrief to say, okay, what was working well here? What could we have done differently? Really doing that like after action review kind of process to be able to understand where there might have been opportunities to do things better, but also what we can learn from that and bring forward into other projects. So sometimes I'm working with a couple of colleagues right now on something, and we kind of like came up with this new system for this organization. And so as we were doing it, we were thinking, oh, is this something that we can offer to others? Like I think others would be able to learn from. And so taking that time to be able to dialogue about, what the value of certain parts of our work has been really helpful.
Talking to other people that do what you do is so important. I think so often we think we need to compete with other people, right? Especially women, right? We got to compete with each other. And then when we open those lines of communication, magic can really happen.
Yeah, Stephanie Evergreen is an evaluator in the US, and I did a business course with her when I was shifting into the full-time business. And one of the things she talks about is like the pie is not a defined size.
Yes.
So we can just make the pie bigger.
I love it.
And yeah, absolutely. So that's really stuck with me.
And
that's absolutely the way that I approach this work. Yeah.
I love it. So when there are negative outside opinions when it comes to your work, how do you handle those, and how do you make sure that they don't turn into negative thought patterns and self-doubt and things like that?
I love negative feedback. I find it helps me. Not like I'm very like grateful to be able to work with organizations who are very thoughtful about how they provide feedback. But I really appreciate when they bring their honest feedback to me. And one of the examples, as evaluators, we sometimes, often write reports for organizations. And so I had submitted a colleague and myself submitted a report to this organization that we had a really strong relationship with. We had been working with them for a number of months, and we really valued them and their work, and submitted a report, and they came back and basically said that it had missed the mark. And at first I was kind of taken aback by it, and was able to sit on it for a little bit before responding to understand more about what their, feedback was about. And that's the big step that I often take is like, okay, let's chat about it. Let me hear more about what you have to say so that I can understand what did miss the mark. And what we ended up with was a very, very good product that we were all super happy with because we took in that negative feedback. So as an evaluator, I'm trying to tell my organizations, like, you need to be able to take constructive feedback. And so I definitely need to be able to do that myself. It's part of like building that psychological safety in the work that I do. So I totally welcome it. And really, I think the biggest thing is like taking care of yourself while you're receiving it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because the risk is that you hear it and you let it like just fester and it becomes something that
you tie to your worth. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you're like, okay, let me see like what parts of this can add value to what I'm doing, who I am, what parts of it are also, sometimes it's like, well, I can understand that an organization is under these certain constraints. Funders are a really big challenge in our sector often, right? And so like their funder is forcing them to report on something that, none of us feel really good about, but they're feeling that pressure from the funder. And so maybe the way they presented that feedback didn't feel great to me at the moment, but I can get underneath it and figure out exactly what we're actually trying to do and get us to something that's like mutually agreed. So
I
yeah.
love that. Yeah, and giving other people a bit of grace as they're providing that. I like that. What would you say are some of your non-negotiables, or what I call hills to die on, in your business or your work-life balance?
So non-negotiables for me are really about like dignity. So in the kind of work that I do, we often are engaging folks with lived experience in these sectors. And so I really, really work hard with organizations to help them understand how to engage people in a good way that, really isn't extractive,
Yeah.
because our work as evaluators has often historically been extractive and has
Mhm.
caused harm. And so trying
Mhm.
to move away from that while also recognizing like those constraints that these organizations do face. So sometimes maybe like, engaging a bunch of your clients is not the right step right now because you don't have like anything at funds or anything to give them to support them, because you're not
Yeah.
actually going to be able to change anything based on their feedback. So maybe we build a pathway to engagement that happens down the road rather than in this process where it wouldn't be like, it would be more transactional or it wouldn't be beneficial for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one big one for me. And then in terms of myself and my time, like I have really honestly like forced by my lifestyle moved away from being able to be responsive at all times, right?
Yeah.
And so I usually can't reply on weekends, I can't reply on evenings, and I just have stopped feeling guilty about that.
I love it.
Yeah, and that's how that works, and that's the end of that. And then one of the things that I still struggle with right now, I do have an out of office saying that I'm in like a summer slowdown, but for some reason I really find putting up an out of office to be like something that I don't do. Like it's really hard for me to do that. And so this summer I did it. Last summer I didn't. And so I was still like, even though I was on vacation for a week, I was still responding to emails during that week. And I was like, I wish I would have just put an out of office on. So I'm trying to get better at that when I am even just taking one day off, putting an out of office so that I'm setting that expectation and I don't have to do it manually. I
Yes.
can have like my email provider do that for
That's
me.
a
So
great idea. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Tell me about a time where you had to go outside your comfort zone, and how did you handle and learn to deal with the discomfort of it?
So there are lots of times as an evaluator where either something comes up through the process that feels uncomfortable, or, our initial conversations felt very values aligned, but as we get into the process, something comes up that isn't, or that something comes up through feedback from like clients or folks support that are trickier and harder to navigate. And so that has happened to me a number of times over the years. And I find I just really always try to stick to that relational approach to those kinds of things. Where an example of where that came up was with a client who, through a process with them, we recognized that people that we were speaking with directly would not necessarily have the anonymity that our consent agreement had allowed for. And
Yes.
so the consent agreement was something that the client themselves agreed to, but then through conversation, we recognized that they were going to approach this feedback and essentially try to figure out who said what,
Yeah.
which is not values aligned for me, right? And so that was a challenging, and that has come up like a number of times over the years. Thankfully, not often,
Yeah.
because I have been able to like tease out those organizations. But what I try to do in that situation is then be really honest with the person who's providing me feedback and say,
Mm.
while I will not give your name and I will not share this, if there is something that you feel might risk your anonymity or might draw some negative response from, whoever it might be, from this organization, from your employer, whatever the situation might be, please flag that for me. And we will
that.
find a different way to introduce this into our report, right? So an example, we were able to, there were a couple of things that came up in this one situation that I'm thinking of particularly, and we were able to actually find evidence to share that. So we built it into a different part of the report and didn't include it in the feedback directly from the folks. Yeah. So those are challenging to navigate, but it's really, again, about like touching in with your values and figuring out how do you show up so that you're still doing a good job for the client and they're getting what they need, but you're also like respecting the people who are participating.
I love that. I love that you can balance that.
It's hard.
Speaking of balance, I want to know who's on your support team, whether it's a therapist, a coach, who helps you be your best self so that you can be the best entrepreneur, best mom, all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. So having a background in social work, I am a big fan of therapy. And whenever, every couple of years, I end up with a therapist for a bit of time to just, make sure that I have that like person to bounce things off of and to, support my own personal development. So I think that's really important. A lot of times at transitions, I find that really valuable. So I do have a current therapist. I do have, a supportive family who are around and, can call them for help when I need them. So that's appreciated and valued.
Helpful.
Yeah. I have lots of great business colleagues who we've created like a nice network together. And there are different spaces that happens in. So one example, there's a group for any other nonprofit folks. There's the Nonprofit Hive is something definitely worth checking out. They do 30-minute weekly live chats and they're adding some other group chats and things on. Yeah, it's super cool. It's free. It's super low barrier. Like you get an email and if you're available, you sign up for that week and there's 4 time slots to choose from. You meet people from all around the world. Through that, I'm also part of a group called Trusted Hive Partners, which is other consultants who are doing that kind of work. So we are, they have a very active WhatsApp, which I'm not as engaged in as I would like to be, but we also meet regularly and just get like that opportunity to share kind of ideas and challenges and all of that kind of thing. So I find that really valuable. And then I'm part of a circle of women that is really lovely that I enjoy. And I found that has been so important for me to protect time for myself. Yeah. So we meet monthly and I have the opportunity, like I know that I'm going to spend that hour every month just on my own because it's so easy to push that time for yourself off your plate. Yes. Yeah. When things get busy, it's like the first thing to go, right? And so I found that I've invested in that makes me prioritize that protected time. So yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. Are there any other systems or strategies that you use in your life at home to make your business work for you?
I am open to suggestions because I am still figuring it out. I do have someone who comes in and help cleans every couple of weeks. So that's an important one for me. Totally. I really just try to like take the like lowest friction opportunities as possible. Just even like looking at my week ahead and when I plan meals or things like that, like if the week is really busy, I'm going to be doing shortcuts. Like we're doing bag salad, we're doing whatever, right?
Yes.
Figuring out those kinds of things. There's even like when, my kids, of course, in school, like a Lunchable is such a huge treat. And so I'll look ahead and if I have like a day that I'm like, I can't even imagine over that day making lunches, then I'm putting a couple of those in the fridge for that day, right? So just trying to find those like low barrier opportunities, finding those times like to let the kids be kids and not feeling like I need to like plan every minute of their lives. So just trying to find those like really low friction times. Like we can just sit outside and I can watch you run around and play in the sprinkler. Yeah. And, I can be like replying to a couple of emails that I need to, right? And also like preparing my kids for that. We had a conversation yesterday. We were at the park and they said, Mom, do you really need to be on your phone right now? And I was like, listen, there are 3 of you. You are playing together. We came to this it was a new park we've never been to. And I'm going to take 10 minutes to like answer some emails. And that's part of the flexibility that my business allows us so that they can understand also and see me as like a whole person who's not just like mom all the time.
Just not mom. Yeah. I love that. I think that's so, so, so important. So I like to say that your business is an act of resistance because it is. It allows you to control your labor, your money, and then you fully own your impact. How is your business an act of resistance?
Well, I think it is in a lot of ways. And I mean, the biggest way is that I truly believe, like my tagline on LinkedIn is use your data, change the world. I truly believe the reason that I went into my master's program was in public policy. And literally the reason that I did that was because I was working in a grassroots nonprofit organization with 40 other nonprofits here locally. And I saw, like, what the challenges are and what needs to change to be able to make a difference in the community, but nobody is listening to you. And so I did a master's in public policy so I could try to help translate what these organizations and these passionate folks knew on the ground to the people who are actually making decisions, actually controlling money. And so I think that when I look at the work that I get to do now, I actually get to help people build the case for their work in ways that are so much more. I've worked a lot for funding organizations, and in particular outcome-based funders, and they have their outcome framework, but they're serving a purpose for that organization as well, like for that funder, right? So we're able to speak across our granting portfolio about outcomes, but it doesn't necessarily tell the impact of that individual organization's work in the best way. So I'm helping these organizations be able to make a compelling case for the work that they do and the steps that they need to take to actually address root causes of problems.
I love that.
And when you can build that case with data, you can attract more funders, more donors, but you can also attract more participants. We know this, that people are more likely to come into programs where they know what the change looks like as a result of these programs, what's expected of them. It also attracts more employees, like good quality staff are coming into these organizations because of the way that they can talk about their work and the way that they've structured their work to support their team members. And so all of that, I feel, is like this, little ocean of resistance that's happening within these organizations to be able to influence the broader systems, and then being able to connect them together so that it's not just one organization singing the song, it's many voices singing from the same songbook.
I love it.
And it inspires me every day to be able to work with these orgs.
That's so cool. You're so amazing.
Thank you.
So what exciting things are you working on now, or what's next for you?
Well, super relevant, I think. To the last question, my one project that I mentioned is we're like 2.5 years into a 3-year project. It was funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada. It's with Sustainable Livelihoods Canada that I mentioned earlier. And we are working with 3 gender-based violence organizations in Ontario to understand the well-being of their staff within these organizations. And so we've done a research component was the first phase. So we work with the University of Guelph Center for Community Engaged Scholarship. And so we have students from there who interviewed all of the staff across these 3 organizations using the Sustainable Livelihoods framework to understand their holistic well-being. And then each organization developed a pilot solution that they could implement internally to improve their staff well-being. These are 3 feminist organizations who are really already, we chose them because they had a high level of psychological safety within the organizations that we had observed. And so they were already on a really good path. And now they're adding these well-being pilots. We're measuring now the results of those pilots. And then the next 6 months, we'll be sharing our findings from that in the hopes of influencing system change.
Amazing.
For all organizations based on what we've learned. There's a lot of research that's been done using, for example, survey tools where you get a good breadth of knowledge, but we're really layering on that depth of what this actually looks like in people's day-to-day life and what it means for them and their ability to stay in the sector.
So important.
Who gets to choose to be in the sector and who gets to stay there, right? So examples like a lot of folks we heard from, they need to have a second source of income in their home to feel safe staying in the sector. And in particular, when you're talking about gender-based violence, there's risk involved with that, right? When you rely on another person's income to be able to do your job at the wage that you are paid for it, that's problematic. And so we're able to shed some light on those things. And I'm super looking forward to the knowledge mobilization phase of that.
That's amazing. I love that. So lastly, when all is said and done, what do you want to be remembered for?
Just as a good person, as someone who made the next, I've been saying this from Frozen 2, right? The next right choice, do the next right thing. And that's something that, I always try to do, recognizing that I maybe can't see 10 steps down the road, but I can see 1 step down the road. And so as someone who really tried to continue on a path that was good for me and my family, but also was good for my community and the world around us.
I love that. And just push that brick wall a little bit, and
I hope so.
we'll be all on our way.
I hope
I
so,
love
yeah.
it. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you all so much for listening.